We'll dive more into the Democrats' tall tales about President Trump's tax plan later this hour. But first, Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson is warning there's an ugly truth about the big, beautiful bill and its spending and the lack of cuts. He is joining us now. Welcome, Senator Ron Johnson. I said you are a conservative with a conscience and a calculator. Great to see you, sir. You have a piece in the Wall Street Journal, and it's stark, but I hope everyone reads it. One thing you write, the vision of limited federal government is now unattainable, but returning to a reasonable pre-pandemic level of spending is doable. But that is not what's happening down on Capitol Hill, is it?
Unfortunately not. This is my third column in a series of three. I started January 1st, where I laid out the very doable and the essential, the need to go to a pre-pandemic level spending. I laid out options using past total outlays under Clinton, under Obama, under Trump. And if you just plus those things up by population growth and inflation using today's Social Security, Medicare, and interest, you'd end up somewhere between 5.5 and 6.5 trillion. This year we'll spend about 7 trillion. And over the next 10 years, we will spend over $89 trillion. The House right now is having a hard time coming up with reductions of 1.5 trillion. When you add in the new spending of $340 billion for border and defense, that'd be a 1.3% reduction over the $89 trillion. So it's meager, it's paltry, it's barely a rounding error. I appreciate what the House is doing. They're certainly, focusing on areas in Medicaid that absolutely do need to be reformed. The types of things that Obamacare did with Medicaid expansion, putting at risk the Medicaid for the people it was intended for, disabled children, women. That's what we all want to do, but we have to return to a reasonable pre-pandemic level. And by the way, you take a look at those outlays, you have to go through the federal budget line by line. Elon Musk and President Trump showed us how to do this. You have to look at the detail. The problem is if you rush this process, we're not going to look at the detail. We're going to have to focus on a few programs, make less than optimal types of reductions to those. But again, I don't like talking about cuts because we're at such an unreasonable level now, from 4.4 trillion in 2019 to $7 trillion now. It's a 58% increase. It's unprecedented. We have to return to a reasonable pre-pandemic level.
Before Jason jumps in here, just to put an exclamation point on it, the House Republicans are working on cutting $150 billion a year. Over 10 years, it's $1.5 trillion. That's about what the interest on our national debt was last month. Go ahead.
No, that's a good point. I mean, I look at the 10th Amendment and I wonder where is that? Why isn't that in this discussion? Where are all the DOGE cuts? Have we implemented all of those in the law? And then, Senator, I would like to get your take on the SALT discussions, because supposedly tonight the Speaker is meeting to have further discussions with those in the Northeast who want to raise that number. And I just don't see where we can actually do that. I happen to think that SALT should be at zero.
So you mentioned, the fact that the vision of our founding fathers is unattainable. Back in 1930, before FDR's New Deal, the federal government spent 3.5% of our GDP. State and local governments were 9.1%. Now, that was really the framework of our Constitution. A limited federal government within the enumerated powers, and then most governing occurring close to government at the state and local level. Now the federal government is spending close to 24%. We're taking in about 17% in terms of revenue. That's a huge differential. That's a structural deficit of somewhere around 6% currently. Again, it's completely unsustainable. And now you've got, one of the triumphs of the TCJA was the fact that we limited the deduction for state and local taxes so the federal taxpayers in low tax states aren't basically subsidizing high tax states like New York. I understand the difficult nature that has for Republicans in those states, but again, we're probably willing to accommodate them to a certain extent, but what they're asking for, I think, is not achievable.
You want to move on to this?
Yeah, well, we also want to get your reaction to Trump's major investment announcement in Saudi Arabia today. Have a listen to this.
With this trip, We're adding over $1 trillion more in terms of investment into our country and buying our products.
I mean, what's your take? The president certainly is bringing home the bacon.
Well, that's great news. Now, we actually have to realize those, just like you mentioned Doge. On their website, they say they've identified $165 billion of savings. And by the way, that has exposed not only the grotesque levels of waste, fraud, and abuse, but literally it exposes how clueless and oblivious members of Congress are to the waste, fraud, and abuse. So, but in both cases, we have to realize it. We have to actually codify those savings under Doge, and we have to make sure that this investment is actually made.
Amen to that, Senator Ron Johnson. And see, I did not lose my mind and my hair didn't catch on fire, y'all talking about the state and local tax deduction. So you have to come back for that to happen. You know, self-immolation. It's a wondrous thing.
Senator, thank you.